Hey everybody, welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games. Today we continue my top 100 board games of all time. Last time we covered games numbers 80 through 71. Today we're going to be discussing games numbers 70 through 61. So without any further ado, let's get straight to the list. My number 70 board game of all time is a Game of Thrones Oathbreaker. Now this is a party style game very much in the spirit of games like The Resistance, where all the players form two different teams, a team of loyal players and a team of traitors or disloyal players. And the loyal players do not know who their teammates are. They do not know who the traitors are. And as the game progresses, they're trying to figure out, based on the decisions that are being made, based on the body language that's being conveyed, they're trying to process this information and try to piece together who their teammates are and who their opponents are. Now, this game has a Song of Ice and Fire or a Game of Thrones theme attached to it, and I think that it's very well executed. One player is actually going to be the king or the queen, the one sitting on the Iron Throne, the one who is ruling over Westeros, and that player has a phase of the game that's all to themselves, that's separate from the other phase of the game where the other two teams are going to be interacting. And ultimately, it's up to the one who sits on the Iron Throne to figure out correctly who is on his or her side, because the loyal players are in favor of the one who sits on the Iron Throne, and they want to see peace in all of Westeros, while the other players, the disloyal players, they do not want the person who sits on the Iron Throne. They want to usurp the rule of the king or the queen, and they're trying to instill betrayal and mistrust and chaos all over the land of Westeros. And these are the things that we're trying to manage. And basically, there's a score track that determines how much order or how much chaos is going on in Westeros. And based on where that score track is, that will determine who is the winner at the end of the game. Was it the loyal team and the king or queen, or was it the disloyal team, the traitors? Really cool. The actions that are being made, we're playing cards, we're trying to pass or fail certain mission cards, very similar to games like The Resistance. And again, the decisions that people make, and of course their body language that sometimes betrays them, will be very key to figuring out who is who. Really cool game. My number 70 board game of all time, a Game of Thrones Oathbreaker. Now we move on to my number 69 board game of all time, and that is That's So Clever. And this is a roll and write game, and it's the only roll and write game on this list. I have enjoyed some roll and write games throughout the years, and there are some roll and write games that make a decent attempt of making the games thematic. There is no attempt here with That's So Clever. This is clearly a puzzle. It's a numeric puzzle, a mathematic problem, if you will, but I enjoy it. You have 5 different ways of scoring on your sheet, on your score sheet. And based on the rolls and the re-rolls and some of the actions that you trigger that allow you to modify your rolls or further re-roll your rolls, based on these actions, you're going to be scoring on these different tracks. At every course of the game, as the rolls permit, you might be focusing on 1 or 2 of these tracks more than others. In other cases, you might neglect a few. But the point is, you're going to have a final score for each of these different sections on your paper, on your score sheet. And you're going to tally them all up at the end of the game and see if you're the winner. That is if you're playing multiplayer. I do like to play this solo, where you have a certain challenge and you're trying to meet particular thresholds. And depending on where you finish in those thresholds or what range you finish within, that will determine how good you are. Are you excellent? Are you okay? Are you great? Are you poor? And what have you. Really good. Again, no attempt of making this game thematic. There's an original edition, That's So Clever. That's even more clever. I think there's a 3rd edition. I only own the first 2 boxes or the first 2 sets of That's So Clever, but I enjoy playing it when I want to play a quick little puzzly roll and write game. I pull out That's So Clever. My number 69 board game of all time, That's So Clever. My number 68 board game of all time is Shadows over Camelot by Bruno Cathala and Ludovic Mablanc. This game here has been out for a very long time. It has a King Arthur theme to it. And basically all the players it's a cooperative game that again has a secret trader mechanism. There's 1 trader on higher player counts. If you play with the expansion, which I do not own, there could be up to 2 traders. But there is a potential of a trader. There actually might not be a trader. And there are people who play the game or house rule the game where there has to be a trader because they find it to be more fun. However, the rules as written indicate that there might not be a trader. There's a good likelihood that there will be one, but there is no guarantee. And I find that to make things even more interesting because sometimes you play the blame game and you're truly thinking that there's someone there that you cannot trust, and then you finish the game at the end and you all reveal your hidden identities and you realize, wait, there was no traitor. And if you lost, it's like, how did that happen? And if you win, you're like, well, thank goodness. You make your apologies and you move on. But it's a really cool game. Very simple mechanisms as far as how you trigger the different actions that you're trying to do or the different missions that you're trying to take. There's like basically 5 different sections of the board. And you're trying to watch out with all of them because if any one of them gets too carried away, you are going to lose the game. And as you succeed in different missions, you're going to be placing swords on the round table. And after you get a certain amount of white colored swords on the round table, you will trigger the game. However, as you fail in missions, as you are dealt casualties or consequences, you're going to be placing black swords on the round table, and a certain amount of them will clinch your defeat. So you want to watch out with that. But between the cooperative play, the simplicity of it all, the elegance and the beauty of the board and the artwork, and the hidden trader mechanism, it's just a very enjoyable experience. My number 68 board game of all time, Shadows over Camelot. Now we move on to my number 67 board game of all time, and this, for many years, was a top 10, top 20, top 25 game for me because of how much fun I had playing this with my family, with my wife, with my nephews, and that is Seven Wonders. Classic pick and pass card drafting game, perhaps the top game for many, many years in that department, the pick and pass card drafting. And I really enjoyed this game, and as I played expansions, in particular the Leaders and the Cities expansion, I came to like the game even more. I found that as I added more expansions to the game beyond Leaders and Cities, it actually took away from the game and made the game a little bit too heavy for what it is, right? Or too long for what it is. So expansions like Babel and what have you just weren't, I felt like Leaders and Cities added just enough to the game to give it the length and the complexity that I needed. But once you went beyond that, it was a bit too much for me. And I do think that it took away a little bit from the gaming experience. But it's still a great game. It's still fun. It's a civilization themed, albeit abstracted. I always enjoy when I play the game. And it's the only game, or one of the few games, that you could play at really high player counts, like 6 or 7. And that does not necessarily interfere with the game length. My number 67 board game of all time, Seven Wonders. Now we move on to my number 65 board game of all time, and that is Viticulture by Jamey Stegmaier. This is the classic at this point worker placement game about winemaking, and I feel that it is just such a elegant and thematic Euro, right? Like, quite often the stigma with Euros is that they're not as thematic as their Ameritrash counterparts. But a game like Viticulture cannot be accused of that. It really feels thematic to me, at least. Not that I'm experienced in making wine, but in as I see the different elements of the game, I see how they make sense and how they fit and how they tie in. Such a cool worker placement game. Has a pretty good Automa solo variant that works as well. My number 65 board game of all time, Viticulture. Now we move on to my number 64 board game of all time, and that is Sheriff of Nottingham. And this is such a fun, it's almost like a party style game, but I almost feel like it's not. Players take turns being the Sheriff of Nottingham, and the other players are trying to sneak in goods, sometimes legal goods, sometimes illegal goods, known as contraband. The contraband will give them additional points. However, they're more risky because if they get caught, they will suffer bigger penalties. However, with the other legal goods, you can only bring in one type of good per transaction, if you will. But if you try to mix and match a couple different goods, even if they're legal, that in and of itself is illegal. So you can only bring 3 chicken if you want, but you can't bring 2 chicken and an apple. You can bring in the apple, but you're gonna have to tell me that that it's 3 chicken. And I, as the sheriff, have to make the decision if I want to waste my valuable time opening up your bag and seeing if you're lying to me. Now, if you are telling the truth, I, as the sheriff, have to kind of pay a consolation prize. I have to appease you for not trusting you, right? But if I'm correct, if my hunch was right and you were lying to me and you were lying to me, you're going to have to pay a penalty according to the amount of contraband or legal goods that you tried to sneak past me. So it's really cool managing, not only controlling your body language and assessing other people's body language, but knowing when to call someone's bluff, knowing when to deceive someone, which sheriff perhaps is more susceptible or more gullible. Perhaps you want to wait for a particular player's turn to be the sheriff before you try to sneak in all those goods. Really fun game. Always enjoyable. My number 64 board game of all time, Sheriff of Nottingham. My number 63 board game of all time is Bruges. And this is a game also designed by Stefan Feld. It's the second Stefan Feld game within this set of 10 board games here. And I have not played the game in a while, so I do not want to describe the game and do such a terrible job at it. But I do remember that it's card-based. I always tend to have a preference for games where the heart of the strategy revolves around card play and how you execute this card play. And I do remember some really cool combinations of actions taking place. I will put some images of the game to give a description. And I do remember really enjoying the game. I haven't gotten the game back to the table in a few years. I really do want to play it again and refresh my memory and see if I still feel as fondly of it as I did as I prepared this list. But I do remember some very, very enjoyable experiences playing this game. My number 63 board game of all time, Bruges. Now we move on to my number 62 board game of all time, and that is Legends of Andor. And this game is designed by Michael Menzel, who is really known for his artwork. He is a prolific artist within the board game world, in particular in Euro-style games. And this was his first venture into board game design. And I say first because not too long ago, and I think it was a Robin Hood themed game that he designed. I haven't played it. I do remember being interested in it when I first heard about it. But Legends of Andor is the game I am familiar with. And the artwork is beautiful because he does it himself. And this game is so intuitive and so easy to teach young people or new players. For example, the rules come with a way to ease you in to the first play, where step by step you have like a tutorial, if you will, of the game mechanisms and how a round takes place, because this game is a fantasy themed game where every player will either be a dwarf or an elf or a human or a wizard and what have you. And each of these different classes have different abilities. They have different stats. They have different amounts of dice they roll. So for example, the warrior might roll more dice than the dwarf and even the wizard, but the wizard has a lot of dice manipulation within the one die. I think the wizard only rolls one die. They have a lot of manipulation with that one die that they roll. The elves have many dice, but they have to roll one at a time. Really cool how asymmetric the different characters feel. They start in particular parts on the board, and each space has a numerical value assigned to it, and that is very crucial to the entire flow of the game, that number sequence, and knowing that the enemies are going to move along those number spots in a particular order, and each different enemy has a different amount of moves they can make. Some enemies just make a simple move, moving one space. Other enemies move 2 spaces, and if they get to the castle where the king is at, and they deal a certain amount of damage to that castle, the players have lost. And there's a bunch of different scenarios, a bunch of different expansions. I have not played the expansions yet, but I have played, I think, 4 of the 5 scenarios that are in the base game. And I've always enjoyed it and have had a good time playing it solo, controlling multiple characters, or playing it with other people cooperatively. My number 62 board game of all time, Legends of Andor. And now, for the last game for this video, my number 61 board game of all time, technically a tie between 2 games, and that is Batman, Shadow of the Bat, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shadows of the Past. And these games are both published by IDW, designed by Kevin Wilson. They're pretty much the same game system with different intellectual properties behind them. Both are intellectual properties that I adore and that were very big and important to me during my childhood. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Batman, I was a huge fan. I still am a fan of both of those intellectual properties. Now, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shadows of the Past came out first. I played that game first, and I did enjoy it. But it's really Batman Shadows of the Bat that has elevated this game, because TMNT had only, at least the first box, had only a competitive variant to it. You could only play competitively with one player being the Overlord, controlling Shredder or all the evil forces, and then the other player or players, because no matter how many players there are, there need to be 4 hero characters, no matter what. And the other player or players would control the Turtles or Splinter or any other allies that they might have. Now, I do feel that other subsequent expansions to Shadows of the Past added the cooperative or solo variants, but Batman Shadow of the Bat from the very start gives you that cooperative variant. So you could still play competitively with one player controlling the bad forces or the evil bad guy or main villain for each scenario. That's still an optional way of playing. Or you could play with the cooperative or solo variant, where all the players or player control the heroes only, and an artificial intelligence determines what the villain and their minions will do throughout the course of the game. This is a scenario-based game. The base game comes with 10 different scenarios. It's an episode or episodic style based on the animated series. The Batman game is based not only on Batman from the comics, but in particular, the Batman from the 1992 animated series. And every scenario is taken from an episode from that first season of Batman the Animated Series. And there are additional boxes, Arkham box and stretch goals boxes that I personally do own, because I did get the Kickstarter version of this game. Really enjoyable. The miniatures look nice. The artwork is fine. The mechanisms play pretty well. I enjoy playing it solo. I enjoy playing it with others. I still haven't played the Batman version competitively yet. I'll look into that. But right now, I'm really enjoying the cooperative feel of the game, which I wish that I would have had straight from the beginning with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one. But for now, this game, or these games put together, because you could mix and match content and have some crossover games where the Turtles are teaming up with Batman and Robin, or vice versa, to take on Shredder, to take on Joker. Lots of cool combinations. My number 61 board game of all time, Batman Shadows of the Bat, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shadows of the Past. And that's it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for joining us here at When Harry Met Board Games. Please comment down below and tell me what you think about this particular group of 10 games. Which was your favorite among these games? Which game are you surprised or don't believe deserves a spot in this top 100 at all? I'm interested in seeing what you guys have to say. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.